will be giving the next talk. It's about the testing framework that I've developed at work. My name is David Schmidt. I'm from Vienna, Austria, and I'm programming Perl since 2007. I work for the University of Vienna. The parent group of ours is Acconet and Vienna Internet Exchange, and the group I'm working with is the Internet Domain Administration. Our exclusive client is the NIC AT company, which is located, I think, like 50 meters next to this location here. They are the registry for the .at top-level domain, and since they started introducing the new top-level domains, recently we also have another like 12 or 14, 15 top-level domains that we are taking care of. The Internet Domain Administration Group, we do the software development, the operation of the name servers worldwide, and also the monitoring. Application is a general purpose testing framework that is not strictly, doesn't have to be used for that stuff that we use it for. So you can probably use it for lots of different things that you want to run tests on. And I will not be very specific in this talk about what we do with it, because I want to present the framework itself and not what exactly we are doing with it. The name is, I would change it now. I would give it probably some a name that doesn't have anything to do with the thing that we use it for. But EPP is the extended provisioning protocol. It's used for communication between registrars and registries. And I had to think of a quick name for it, so I thought like application. It's kind of a play on words. Before EPP was used, the registrars, they sent in faxes or emails and saying which domain they would like to buy, and then it ended on the desk of a co-worker of mine, and he filled it into the system. I think like 2-3 years ago we got rid of those interfaces, and it's strictly EPP for registrars. EPP is a XML-based protocol, by the way, which is rather ugly. Yeah, just to give an example, that's an APP frame that you receive when you connect to an APP server. So it's TCP based, and you have to log in and authenticate. That's just where you use it. The registrant is just someone who is buying a domain. Registrar is, I don't know, World4You and lots of other companies selling domains, and they are talking via EPP with the registry. In our case, it's NIC AT. The registry software that is developed at my group of people has its own test suite, but in order to make sure that they are not testing the things that they are developing for, we built an independent QA team that's kind of disconnected from the developers, from the software developers themselves, and we just test again, or hopefully test more or different things than they are doing. The registry software, by the way, is also Perl-based entirely. I think they used Catalyst, but switched it out for a smaller framework. It all started, I think, 1 or 2 years ago, when one of the guys, whenever there was a new software release, he had a couple of files where he had those EPP frames, and he copy-pasted them into some shell-like program that was like an EPP command line client. And he was checking the response if it returned what he was expecting. And at some point I asked him if he wanted to do that somehow automatically, so he doesn't have to work with his mouse a lot or has to copy paste the stuff all the time and do everything manually every day, because it's tedious work. And I think he could use his time much more better than he did back then. And it was only something that I expected to take like 1 week or so. I would just hack this together, give it to him, and then he would use it. But now it's grown much bigger than we anticipated back then. For that, considering that, I'm pretty happy with the architecture, because it was all the upcoming changes and the new feature requests that the people working with it had. They were quite easily it was easy to incorporate them into the existing architecture. And because of the way this project started, I didn't even check if there is something that I could reuse, if there is some framework that does all this stuff, especially the infrastructure around running the tests. So I really hope there isn't. I'm not reinventing the wheel somewhere. But we at some point it was able to replay what my coworker did, but then we wanted to do more, so we had to add other interfaces where we can do a more elaborate stuff, like, I don't know, looking things up in the database. If a specific EPP request changed fields that the way we want them to be changed, or if it's, and so we can make sure that the right thing happens. Also, there are other the SOAP and REST. There are service interfaces that registrars can use to look up special stuff. So we had to these interfaces as well. SSH access was used for restarting Apache, for example. The REST server, for example, is running in an Apache process, and if we want to change the configuration of that, we have to connect to the test machine and change the setting and then restart this stuff. So that allowed us to be quite flexible with the tests and to do and to also to kind of shell out business logic that I don't have time to implement in the framework right away. They can do it, I don't know, in a Perl script on a remote server and just call that. The features that the test framework has is it helps non-programmers developing tests. The tests grew really big over the time, and there is quite a good navigation and search interface for the test output. We also have a command line interface that we use for when we want to run tests in a cron job. We want to run it, I know, after a Git hook, for example, after a new release. We want to run the tests or stuff like that. Also, because we are testing different versions or the same software with different configuration for each top-level domain, for example, we want to run them in parallel, so we don't have to wait, like I think in the beginning was like 6 or 7 hours until the test suite has passed. And also test reports when we ran our test suite and everything was fine, we can store it away, and if 6 months later we get a complaint that something isn't working the way it was expected, we can just send them the file and say, yes, it worked like that, or maybe we forgot a test, and we can look that up as well. Creating such a test is pretty easy. I will show you the interface later. You just click create test and add lots of statements to it. That's like the most basic thing. There is, I don't know, like 20 kinds of steps. For example, you can assign to a variable, you can generate random markers or strings that are used for the handle of a registrar, for example. You don't want to use the same hard-coded string every time, because maybe you want to run a test. Maybe you want to run a test again, and you want to make sure that there isn't the same row in the database already, in case you do not reset the database in between steps. Yes, then we also added more and more stuff like arrays. We have the different kinds of requests or remote calls that we can make, and the return values of those can be checked with one of these steps on the right-hand side. So var check is just to check the string against another hard-coded string, or not necessarily, but in many cases to make sure that, I don't know, the return code is the one that we expected. or if we don't know exactly, but what the check will be like, we can put in a regular expression and say, okay, the return, the response has to be of that format. Our query path is a little bit different. It's actually a query language that if I get a return, I can can look up a part of the response and store that in another variable. Then there are some helper steps. For example, just dump all the request has a stash, and I can just print out everything that's in the stash, so I can, for debugging mostly. I can change the data structures and strings that I have with one of the transformation or math steps. I can add comments for just so if someone looks up the test, he knows what's going on in there. And for reuse of modules, and we have a subtest step and easy for loop for just iterating over values, so we don't have to yeah, it's just for refactoring of the test actually. Data debug is the query language that I was talking about just before. It's kind of like XPath, but it works on Perl data structures. Anything that I get in return from a request is stored internally as a serialized JSON string, and that's just a short example of how you can look up in this case the second item in this array. Once you have the tests filled in, running a test is as easy as you select a configuration. A configuration is actually just an alias for a test. It's usually just a collection of values, like the EPP server that we are connecting to the port, what REST server I'm connecting to, passwords, stuff like that. Then you just click a button. You selected the test itself, of course, I forgot that somewhere there. Then you just click a button, run this test. It will be sent. A broker is looking up a job table, and it picks up the job and sends it to one of various pre-spawned worker processes. This is done using ZeroMQ. The worker processes the job and writes the results to the database. Yep, a job is just a row in a table. It runs a test with optional configuration. It stores stuff like the duration of the entire test run. You can watch it live, so it's the duration, the number of steps, and the errors there updated while the test is running, because our tests run for like 30 or 45 minutes, something like that. It's very, the information that we are writing to the database is very extensive, and so we let it stay in the database for some time, and it will be written to disk after a configurable parameter, like 1 week it is right now, I think, because if we don't need the data anymore, there's no point in filling up the database. Yep. So the first example. I will just start up it's a Catalyst application. So right here I can see I have an example, and I have an example configuration. There is each test can be tagged. That's quite easy because it's a flat list when in this view. So it's like, I don't know, a few thousand lines usually. But with clicking these tags, it's easy to navigate through them. You also have I know this kind of searches like from Google or Google Maps, where it's quite handy. I like to use it a lot, and so you can. In this case, there is just 2 tests in the database. Any test that is tagged with the config tag shows up here in this drop-down list, so you can select the configuration. You then go to the test. What the test is doing is oh, this is the configuration. So it's configured as the REST server is Wikipedia. So I'm looking up some page on Wikipedia. And what the test is doing, it was just any example. This a very simple example that I could think of. Click the wrong one again. It's this one. So it gets it gets the page for the title Perl. Then I can show the definition of the test actually. So it's just reusing the values that I've set in the configuration before. This is template toolkit syntax, so that I don't have to hard code the values in every. I don't have to repeat that stuff. That's just the path to the page that I want to get, and that's about it. This is this one is one of the data. It was one of the query language steps. So this is the stuff that gets me the content that the page has. I think it's Markdown or something like that. And this is the most important step. It's just checking that latest release version, that this string is not changed to a 6 instead of a 5, what it's right now. And the sleep here, it's connecting to itself, and this is just so that that the test isn't over in like 0.2 seconds or something, so that it takes some time to show the progress. That's for the second example. It's kind of I have two buttons that I can start the test with. This one is mainly for debugging because it doesn't stay in the database, it doesn't get exported to disk, so this is the one I want. Here is one that I ran before, like 1.5 half an hour ago. So this one is running. This one is pending right now. I haven't started the message queue, the worker processes yet. Okay. So I'm starting the workers and the broker. So it picks up one task, sends it to one of the workers. It finished after 2.10 seconds, and the worker is reporting to be ready. Again, that's pretty much the same concept that we heard in the two talks before. And if I refresh this page, it's finished. I can see the duration and the steps, and there was no error. And I want to look at the test output. Here we get the configuration. As I said, it's really it's very verbose, the information that I'm logging. So this is the page that I got from Wikipedia, and you can see it's a JSON string. And further down, there is also this kind of search here, where I can jump to specific checks, and this can either the green, or if it had failed, it would be red. I can jump directly to the step in question, and it's green. That means the test was okay. That's that. Then there is the command line interface. It's for automating stuff in cron jobs, because we want to run the test. I think every night we run the test suite against I think 14 instances. It's just a Perl module that other people can use. I tried to have some kind of interface to the other people I work with, so they can just use that and I can test it. That would be is this the live example? No, this is kind of, yeah, you use it just like any other Perl module. You can get a configuration, you can get a test by name, then you create a job, and afterwards you just you can which we want to, you can export it. This is the exact example code that I will be running next. So it connects to the API. It's logging in, gets the example config and the example. It starts a job, and then I'm just every 2 seconds, for 5 times, I'm polling what's the status of the job, and if it finished, I will print a short summary. So this is the code that I just showed you. And there was no error, so that looks good. And you can see in the list that there is a new job. That's a little bit internal. Internally, it's two Catalyst applications that are combined together with Plug, because the one is for users with the browser. They need HTML, they need forms, they don't need it really in this case. But for example, you can add middleware that you don't need on the API. And then there is the second Catalyst application, which is it just has Catalyst action REST controllers. So I wanted to separate them. And then combine them together with Plug Builder. It's pretty. That's a pretty nice way to separate the code that doesn't really have to do anything together. Stilos. Okay, bitte passen. That I lost track a bit now. Okay, I think that's it. Then if I want to extend application, if I have a new interface or some other functionality, I have to create the HTML forms and I have to create a business logic. So in the easiest case, it's just new classes that I'm adding. It's using some plugin system where it loads the classes automatically and you don't have to fiddle around with the navigation and stuff like that. In our case, we use Debian Wheezy, PostgreSQL 9, and Apache for deployment. The application itself runs as two daemons. One is the fast CGI daemons that connect to the Apache is connecting to, and the other one is the message queue, which is forking workers with child, and I'm using the ZMQX class, which is an object-oriented interface to the ZMQ libraries. So you don't have to. We have seen the code before, and it was very C-like, where you had all those constants, and you had to multi-part messages and stuff like that are handled automatically by ZMQX class. So if you want to do stuff with ZMQ, it's probably worth a module to check out. Security is. I just added this because the application is connecting to the remote hosts via passwordless SSH key authentication. So anything that the user can do, you can do via application, and almost the same is true for database or SQL connections, because anything that the user can do that you connect us can be done from the application host. So you have to take. In our case, it's not really tragical because it's development machines and they are set up every day, I think, via Puppet. So also we are in a very controlled environment. So it's something that you have to be careful with if you use it for something where someone might get access to your test framework. This is a test that we ran a couple of weeks ago. It had roughly 165,000 steps. The entire test ran for 1,200 seconds. And the output file that we are storing for like a week or something like that, no, I think it's a month or two. In most cases is compressed. It's a compressed file that's about 3 megabytes. It's pretty big, but we had no reason so far to strip away information, and as long as we don't run into problems with that, we will keep it that way. I've talked to my boss too. I would really like to open source the entire framework, because it doesn't have to be used for registry testing. It can be used for a lot of stuff. I think so, at least. And I really would like to open source it, but of course I have to tell my bosses what their benefit would be, and I was told that there might be legal issues, which is an argument I don't really understand, because I think if you license it with an open source license, the one using it has to take care of that. Anyways, I will keep pushing and try to open source the framework, because I've put a lot of work into it. Yes, that's about it. Any questions?